All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Glad to see that at least you all survived last evening. Anybody go to ACL? All right. Good time? Excellent. Excellent. We did not go. We went and opted for steak instead. But came back and saw a couple of folks in the elevator that were there and said it was pretty good. A lot of people. So, excellent. Well, thanks for taking time to recover early and come in and join us this morning as we start to talk a little bit about the cloud. Okay, welcome. I'm Steven Schneider. I am the program manager for the CompTIA Instructor Network. So basically, I work with our global network of instructors that are teaching IT certifications, A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, all of the good pluses. And with me today is Lee McWhorter. Lee?
How you doing, folks? Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. I'm not a big projector, so I love the microphones. That helps a lot. I am a Spicehead like you guys. I have a little MSP here in Austin, but I work a lot with CompTIA, one of their advisory board members on the instructor network, and do a lot of training for them. And I've been doing a lot of training in the last few years. One of my recent claims to fame is I got every one of CompTIA's certifications in 12 months. So we're going to not really talk to you about that, though. We're going to talk to you about cloud stuff today. So,
all right. Let's see if I can work this. I cannot work this.
Push right. There you
go. Oh, now I really did it.
All right. Tech support will fix it. There you go. You're back in business.
If we only had tech support.
Only.
There we go. So, just real quick, everybody heard of CompTIA before? Awesome sauce. That's great. A lot of people know us for our certs, right? So, but they also don't necessarily know the other arms that CompTIA holds. So, for instance, we are an IT organization. So we are an organization of IT workers that are out in the field. They are our advisory board. They tell us what's going on in the industry. They help us keep the certs up to date. So some people will say, well, CompTIA makes some really bad exams. Well, it's not really CompTIA. It's our subject matter expert pool that comes from folks just like yourselves who are interested in giving back and helping drive the direction of skills. We also have a big philanthropy arm. Always trip up on that word. Creating IT Futures, where we provide grants, training, and resources for dislocated workers and minorities, and able to get them employability skills and up to speed and employed. Also, our advocacy arm in Washington, D.C., which is very involved with working with legislature on anything related to IT and communications. And then, of course, our certifications. Many of you have probably seen this, but this is our updated certification roadmap, where we're starting out with everything from what is a computer all the way up to our cybersecurity expert certs. We are ANSI approved, therefore it's a requirement by the government that all of our certs stay up to date, that fall into that category, especially since we're involved with DoD. So the majority of the certification skills, the infrastructure skills, the cybersecurity skills, all of those certs are updated every 3 years based on industry trends. And then our professional level skill set certs, Project Plus, the Certified Technical Trainer cert, and the Cloud Essentials, which is the entry-level cloud cert, right? What is the cloud all about? I call that our certification for cloud for admins, right? As opposed to the Cloud Plus, which is more geared towards you guys as far as what is going in with the cloud engineering, so to speak. Cool? Anything? Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right, so how many people are in the clouds? Awesome, right? Hot word today, right? Everybody is talking about the cloud. A lot of our bosses, right, admins are saying, let's go to the cloud, right? Why? Because Watson does everything, right? And if Watson can do everything, then you guys ought to be able to get stuff up and running in the cloud. But it's a lot harder right, than when somebody says, take us to the cloud, right? What does that actually mean? Take us to the cloud. We're moving our operations to the cloud. So that's when you guys really need to jump in, right, and say, well, what does that actually mean? What do you want to do? And the Watson answer doesn't really cover it, right? Really, what do we want to do? What is your end goal for me taking our organization to the cloud, right? What's the outcome of my team supposed to do? So how are we going to implement it? The different types of approaches. And then when we get there, what happens then, right? Is everything roses? And then what types of risk are involved with that? And we can't have a discussion related to IT today without talking security, right, at some level. Who's responsible for that? All right. Cloud provides everything, including the kitchen sink, just about, right? So, again, are we throwing the kitchen sink at our cloud implementation? Any thoughts? Jumps in?
Well, one of the things that I think is always interesting is, like Stephen was saying, the managers will come and say, hey, we want to move to the cloud. And I always wonder, did they just read that in a magazine? Or, what is the purpose? That's because it's hot is why they want to do it. And so what we're going to try to talk a little bit about throughout today is, like Stephen said, why? What pieces? Certain things don't really, maybe shouldn't go to the cloud. Other things should. So we'll try to cover a little bit of that today.
But Lee, the cloud is going to save us a fortune.
Well, it can, right? But that's kind of the assumption, but it's really a bad assumption. You know what they say about assumptions, right? It's really a method, if you get down to it from a cost point of view, of moving from a capital expenditures model to moving to an operational cost model. And that may be useful in certain cases, and then in other cases, maybe not so much.
Okay, but that's always the first thing, right? It's going to save us a ton of money. I won't have to pay for as much IT support. I won't have to pay for as much hardware. And everything will be stored in the cloud, so I don't have to worry about storage, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the first things that we need to do is educate our admins on basic terminology, right? So understanding what the implementation is supposed to be, right? So the obvious stuff. What are we trying to do? Software as a service? We're going to run our applications on there? How about desktop as a service? Maybe all of our desktop apps will be coming from the cloud. Infrastructure as a service, right?
Yeah, all the as a services, right? It's like, maybe you've seen this too. It seems like every time I turn around, there's another something as a service. Security as a service, on and on. So what are you trying to accomplish is a big piece of that first thing. And you've got to make sure that the management team knows what they're talking about if they're going to talk to you, and you can actually implement it, right? Pull it off.
Benefits and drawbacks of everything, right? So benefits of software as a service?
Well, it's theoretically easy administration and updates because you're not having to do a lot of the updates, right? Like if you use Office 360, how many of you use Office 360 or something? Google, whatever, it doesn't matter. So about half of you, right? That's becoming more and more. Half of my clients, I've moved them to one cloud structure, and that's nice in that regard. But it sure doesn't mean somebody still doesn't have to administer it, right?
So, side tangent 1 for the morning. If you're lucky, I'll keep it to under 10. Side tangent number 1. My wife's office went cloud. Good for them, right? She came home one day and she said, "You won't believe this." Some language like your shirt, like, really? What? And she couldn't. I can't access anything. And she was on her laptop just banging away. And like, well, what are you doing? And they were adopting. They were mixed, right? So they were still using some Microsoft products, but they were using Google Cloud, right? And she was just having a fit over it. And it was like, well, whose brilliant idea? Who's doing it? What? Were you asked about it? Were you, what you use? What information you're providing? What applications do you have to access? She was like, no, they just came in and told us, today you log in this way, and we're all going to be cloud-based. So understanding the benefits and the drawbacks, what types of services, right, is critical for being able to have down and understood first before we're moving on. And then what type of approach are we doing with our cloud migration, right? Are we picking everything up and transferring it over to our cloud provider, right? So the rehost, or also called the lift and shift or the forklift model, right? We're just picking everything up and moving it in there. That sounds like a great and easy operation, right?
Yeah, if it works.
If it works.
Well, and you really, like you're going to get into, but you lose, in many cases, the benefit of cloud if you just do that, right? You're just taking an old application or workflow and dropping it over. And it's like, well, did you really get all the benefits from that?
All right. Replatform, also referred to as partial refactor, right? So maybe I need to tweak some applications before they run in the cloud, right? So, and kind of getting back to your point, right? Utilizing the benefits of the cloud. Possibly doesn't do it, right? And still also depends on the type of applications that I need to move over there. Correct?
Yeah, it really does vary, and some of you that experience this probably have already seen this. If you just drop something in the cloud, you can get maybe X benefit from it. But if you take the time to potentially look at, I mean, what are the benefits of the cloud, right? Like scalability and things, right? But if your app is not built to handle that, because you've always just run it on on-premise hardware and you don't have any functionality, then are you gaining the most benefit from doing that? And of course, it's more complex to have your dev team rewrite everything for the cloud infrastructure, but you may get more benefit from it.
Then there's refactor, right? Refactor. We're going to customize our applications as we move them over, okay? So now we're getting our applications in line to utilize the benefits of the cloud, but there's cost that goes with it, right? So now there's more dev work that goes into this, making sure our applications are tuned in. Maybe some of our, depending on some of our applications, right? Some of our databases, we need to be doing that anyway. So you have to look at the cost that goes in and is associated with it. Definitely more cloud friendly, right? So to speak, if I could use that term, as opposed to just the lift and shift. Lift and shift obviously is the cheapest, right? Because I'm just going to say, I'm taking this box and I'm putting everything that's on this box onto the cloud, right? Okay. Anything else?
Well, the one thing too about the whole refactor or partial refactor, and some of you may have had to do some of this with your deployments, is that, and I guess I have this question, you folks that have moved something to the cloud, and not counting Google Cloud or that software as a service, moved some kind of application, are you using just one vendor or are you using multiple vendors? Because that becomes a huge factor. If you go down the road of doing this if you go down the road of redesigning your application, and it's easier to just, okay, we're going to use X, and so there's only one set of APIs, one set of things you have to learn for your dev team. But then that opens up the possibility of that old IT bugaboo of vendor lock-in, right? We've all faced that before, and so the cloud hasn't gotten rid of it unless you're willing to take kind of that hybrid approach, right, and use a multi-cloud model. But that increases the cost even more.
What is that phrase that administration is always going to ask you whenever you come back with a proposed solution? How much, right? And more precisely on that how much, what is the... Yeah, what's the ROI? What's the return on investment? You want to redesign all of our applications that are working. All we want to do is move them to the cloud. So now you're coming back and you're telling me that we need to redesign the way our applications work, how the data is going to be stored, how we're going to access them via the cloud. And this is coming with a price tag. What's the return on investment? And when we look at that, that's a big thing, right? We also have to come back and say, right, Watson is not always the right answer, okay? We have to go back to admin and tell them, sometimes it's good to flip the shoe. We're moving everything to the cloud. Make it happen, okay? What's the return on investment? What services are we implementing? What services do we not need to implement within the cloud, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you're going to talk on that in a minute with security, I think that's one of the big things that's a driver. There's a lot of stuff that benefits from the cloud, but then there's a lot of things that you have to be really careful about moving to the cloud. If you end up misconfiguring something, or because you're also offloading some of your security burden to the cloud, which is positive theoretically, but in this day and age, maybe not. There is that shared multi-tenancy model, and then things can come back to bite you.
So there are a lot of cloud service providers out there, right? Excuse me. Obviously the big ones, Amazon, Microsoft, Google. We have a lot of choices to choose from. Going to these guys and saying, hey, we're moving to the cloud. And if we just say that, they start slavering at the mouth, right? Because we're going to start seeing bills. And understanding how they're charging and the services that are offered become really key. So research has been done by a bunch of different folks. ISC Squared, SANS. There's a lot of groups that have done research into cloud operations, and a lot of those are linked within the PowerPoint slides when you download them. So SANS has come back and basically really said, hey, we're wasting money with cloud services because we're not really fine-tuning it. So they said, really an organization has about 35% of wasted cloud services that they're paying for that they're not using or not implementing or don't really need. Okay, so understanding what services the cloud provider is offering us, what we're using and implementing is a big thing. Visibility, right? We'll talk about silos. Every organization has silos as it is. CompTIA has silos. I found out that there's another group that's from another department that's here, but we didn't really know that we were all going to be here. So it's silos. Who's talking to who? And when we talk about cybersecurity, we talk about silos a lot, right? There's the board of directors silo, right? There's the IT team silo. We get in our groups and we work with this group, but where's that communication coming from? From in here. Who has access to what types of information? And who has that visibility and the access control over our information that's in the cloud? Our applications, our data. So understanding the visibility that we have with our data and with other departments within the cloud, that's another thing that has to be worked out before we really start talking, or as we're talking with the cloud service provider. Okay? Comments? Thoughts?
Well, we're going to talk more about security. So.
Oh, yeah. That's big. So then we'll, the security aspect of it is huge. And Lee's going to talk to us a little bit more in detail about security. But that's something else that we have to, that goes into this risk portion, right? Who has access to the data? How are we protecting that data? And what is the potential for threat in that area? So where do clouds come from, right? Well, every 5th and 6th grader understands that clouds are a part of the water table process. But in reality, we all know the truth, right? That clouds are mostly made of Linux servers. So it's infrastructure, right? And understanding how infrastructure within the cloud is going to be managed, operated, accessed. Again, as part of our risk analysis. Again, what is our platform that our cloud service provider is offering us? Are our applications going to run in this environment? How are we accessing it? Okay, who has access to the actual operating system on there? Okay, am I going to be managing it? Are they going to be managing it? Okay, who's ultimately responsible for that? And then as Lee's going to talk to us about in just a minute, right? We're talking about it's a network. It's nothing more than a network, right? Back in the day, I used to call it a mainframe, right? Because I'd go in, I'd get on a terminal, and I'd access email, I'd access applications and data. I didn't know where they were, right? They were just in a big room in another building on campus, okay? But if we're talking about infrastructure and we're talking about computers, there's what? The chance for access from somebody else, right?
Including the cloud provider staff, though that's rare, but we have to worry about insider threats, so do they, right?
It's a big risk.
It is.
So you get the cloud. Boss is happy. Yay! We're in the cloud. So they can go to the board of directors. We're in the cloud. They can go to the golf course. Yes, we're right in the cloud. Okay? But now what? All right? So if we look at cloud operations, we don't have to worry about backups, right? We're in the cloud. If our data's in the cloud, it's backed up, right? Maybe. Okay? But, right? There's always a but. Something happens. All right? What if, right? There was what was the headline the other day? Travel company, Thomas Cook, right?
Yeah, they shut down.
Thomas Cook shut down, just like that. Thousands of tourists in Europe were stranded.
And in Cuba last night, I read.
Oh, in Cuba too? Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. What if that's your cloud service provider? Ruh-roh. Okay. Now what do? Pucker factor instantly goes up, right? So things happen. Things happen. Where's the backup? Right? Is it in my house? Is it in the cloud service provider's house? Is it in another storage facility? That's safe, right? Data warehouses, that's safe. So how are these backups being made? Okay? What are we doing in-house to protect our information should something happen? And how much of that information are we backing up locally? Okay? What is our backup policy? And more importantly, is our group, are the other departments keeping up with the policy? Are they following it through? Services policies, right? Again, understanding the services that we're utilizing and working with our cloud service provider to make sure that they are up to speed, making sure we're understanding what we're paying for, right? So those services that the cloud service provider is offering us, they come with fees, right? And going back to that wasted space that we're using, those wasted services, we're still paying for those, right? And not only are we paying for those, and we're doing backups, right? We're paying them to do our backups for us, and we're doing redundant backups. So then on top of those services that we're paying for, we may also have other fees associated with data transfer as associated through WAN transfer, right? So that's another charge on top of another charge, okay? So that's something we need to take into consideration. It's kind of like booking a hotel room, right? It's pretty nice. Spice World, right? You go to the lodging page, and you pick a hotel, and you click on the book a room, and that's already done for you. All right? I get the joy of having to book rooms all over the place, and then when I do, the friggin' prices change daily, right? It's kind of like air travel. And the thing about it is, I was talking with somebody at a hotel up in Kentucky where I'm going to be in a few weeks. And not only does the price change daily, my wife said, hey, here's a really good price. So I didn't do anything about that night. I waited to the next day. The price was completely different. But not only that, the price varied per night of the length of the stay. Like, come on, give me a break, right? What's wrong with just a flat rate? So we have to watch that, right? Especially with our services. And then again, controlling access. Who has access to the information? Do the right people have access to a database or to an application? All right? Who else has access to it? Okay? Does our cloud service provider have access to that database? Do they have access to the application? Okay? What about remote employees? Okay? What type of access do they have? Monitoring becomes huge now. Okay? Lee will talk about this in just a minute. Right? Monitoring that access and who is accessing the data and when is that data being accessed. Right? All of a sudden we're seeing Bob. Is there a Bob in here? Oh, good. So all of a sudden Bob's accessing data, retrieving data at 3 o'clock in the morning? Yeah? Hey, Bob's really diligent, right? I got an email from my boss from 3 o'clock in the morning a few weeks ago. I didn't open it. I told him I thought it was, malicious software. I do my know before training. He said, "Why didn't you respond?" I thought, well, man, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I didn't think it was you. So analytics. Analytics becomes a key role in monitoring our cloud usage and our cloud service. Staying on top of the services that are being offered and the fees that are going to be associated with that, because that will change. It fluctuates, and that's something that you have to work very closely with the cloud service provider on monitoring it. Either have it locked down within your agreement with the cloud service provider, or be sure that you're staying on top of it if it's written in there that it'll be varied depending on usage and space.
Yeah, you definitely have to watch. Once you get to the cloud, maybe management's joking at the golf course that they are saying they're proud, they got it, you're there. But you folks still have to run that. You have to manage it. And we're going to talk about security monitoring, but one of the biggest challenges is the whole optimization of the cloud once you get there. And, we've all seen and know the phrase feature creep or scope creep, right, on any project. I've seen this happen so many times, it's just boggling that people get into the cloud, they migrate some workflows and some applications up, and they're really happy about it, it's working. And, this is the good case, this is not the bad one, so they're happy it's working. And then another department wants something, and somebody else wants something, and they send up some more testing VMs for the dev team. And the next thing you know, they're not paying attention, and their bill is tripled. Now they're way over what they used to spend when they ran it in-house, because we're not optimizing that on a regular basis, shutting down that 35% of resources that we don't need, or even just as silly, and I actually know a case here in town that I won't mention, but a friend of mine's their IT guy, so the dev team spun up a bunch of VMs and never shut them down. And then all of a sudden they got a $35,000 bill. That obviously needed to change a few policies and do some things, right? So.
Absolutely. So, cloud's worth nightmares, right? Sunny days. Oh, I thought it was funny. Okay.
They liked your water cycle a whole lot better.
They did, didn't they?
They
yes.
liked that one.
All right. I
like that one.
So the textbook definition, right, for cloud operations management, okay, all goes into designing, overseeing, and controlling of our cloud implementation. And that's just what we've just been talking about over the last few minutes. Monitoring what's going on, having a good plan when we go into place. Having that plan documented with our cloud service provider, making sure that we're making efficient use of those services that the cloud service provider offers, making sure we're paying for what we're using, not for what we're not using, making sure that our cloud service provider has thresholds that they need to meet as far as reliability, speed, right? Access. And a lot of that also can get really sticky, right? Because we may see an application that is very slow in response, and our end users are really quick to blame the IT department, right? Well, maybe. Depends, right? But that's the big thing. It depends. It could be the quality of wireless access that they're on, if they're in the basement of the organization trying to do something and they don't have very good connectivity, or it may have to do with bandwidth traffic back to the cloud service provider themselves. So understanding where those bottlenecks are and making sure that they are addressed ahead of time or throughout. Again, going back to monitoring our traffic. Okay. Availability. Right? Clouds need to be available, even on sunny days. Our services need to be available. Admin is going to tell us everything is critical, right? Everything in our organization we need to have access to so that we can work. Okay? 24/7. Okay? Which of that is really critical data that we have to have access to, that the cloud service provider has to make sure that we can access it from somewhere? Excuse me. Is it our customer database? Is it our accounting software? Is it our employee records? Right? What is it that has to be available 24/7? And the answer can't be everything, right? Because guess what that does to our cloud service provider?
Makes them happy.
It makes them super happy, right? All right? We're going to get a couple more memberships to the golf club. Okay? So identifying those critical applications, those critical points that we need to make sure the cloud service provider has up and running 24/7. Okay? What happens if we don't? Right? What is our plan? Right. Maybe the cloud provider is providing access to that critical database 24/7. Access is there. It's yours if you want it. Okay? But somebody down the road is doing some construction work, right? And their backhoe accidentally digs up the T1 line. Right? Now what do we do? Okay? So there's a lot of things to consider as far as availability. How are we going to operate in the dark? Okay? Anything? Comments?
Yeah, and it fits and dovetails to what we're about to start talking about a little bit more, which is security. Because, while we all the time think of security as protecting from the black hat hackers and putting up our defenses and things like that, one of the things that I'm always emphasizing to my students is, if you know this, we have 3 promises we make to our company: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That's a cybersecurity task. Our job is not just to live in a silo and lock everything down. Our job is to make sure the organization succeeds. Otherwise, we're going to be out of a job anyway, right? So availability is huge, and that's why we have all those concepts like business continuity planning, disaster recovery planning. And just because you move everything to the cloud does not mean you are now exempt from having to do that type of planning and thinking. As a matter of fact, it complicates your life in many cases. Oh my gosh, how am I going to make sure that my organization continue to run when Amazon's down? And they have been, and they will be again, right? Or a piece of it. Maybe it's just one data center, but they power so much of the internet. And it's a lot of burden we're putting on them, right? So those are the kind of things we definitely have to talk about from an availability point of view.
It's a bad day when I can't access Netflix.
Exactly. And that happens, and Twitter blows up, right? Or if you can't access Twitter, then Facebook will blow up. And if Facebook's not available, Twitter will blow up. But, a lot of that, folks, is being provided by some of our cloud providers. So one of the things we have to take into account from an availability point of view is, do we want to have multiple cloud providers? Do we want to be able to literally shift workloads from one cloud provider to the other? Now that helps address that availability, but what we talked about earlier, that is a lot more refactoring to design for that kind of flexible model. But the benefits of it can really save you on the backside sometimes.
Portability.
Yeah, portability. Actually, I saw a really cool, and you folks may have seen some of this too, but one of the, it's not here, they weren't not the subgroup, but a division of HP has a really neat, I think it's a Nimble storage or whatever, but they have a product where they literally can help move workflows really quickly from one cloud provider to the other. And there's two models that they use. One is that, it's sort of that disaster recovery. Okay, we're up here, we're in XYZ, we're in Amazon or we're in Azure, and that seems to have a problem. We can shift some stuff. But they also push it from the point of view of, sort of like Steve was talking about, prices change. Supply and demand. That's the way things work. I actually have an economics degree, so I fully understand that. And it happens at this micro level these days. And so some organizations are taking advantage and moving their applications to whoever's cheaper at a particular time. But that, once again, complicates your planning for availability.
Awesome.
Well, the next thing we're going to talk about is security, right?
Done. Done.
We're done.
Yeah.
Okay.
We use AWS.
Yeah, well.
Amazon will secure our stuff.
Exactly. Well, it depends on what model, right? And we talked about those as a services. If you are running infrastructure as a service, has your security changed at all from your old on-premise servers? Not really, because you're still got a server you're managing. It's a full server, right? I think one of the things that's interesting, and you folks that have done some cloud stuff know this, when you spin up a VM in Amazon, generally speaking, they don't let you just put a password in, right, to create that instance. They want to create keys, public-private keys. Inject the public one into the instance for you. You download the private one. You can get in. Trying to use a more secure model than username, password, right? But then I see people go to that model, immediately log into that server, and spin back up the ability to log in with username and passwords just like the server they've been running in their office for years. Well, that's great, but now once again, we have the exact same security problem we always did, brute force attacks, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to talk about some of the different aspects. So what are some of the things that keep people up at night, right? So these are some of the top things, and I'm not going to go through all of them because we got to have some time for questions, and we're a little over halfway here, but the data loss and leakage. And in some ways, it's worse in the cloud because we have a tendency to, I don't know how many people have heard of S3 buckets. There's a whole sub-niche of people in my field, InfoSec and security, that their job, that's what they do all day long, is just scan to find open S3 buckets. And there's bad guys doing this too, so you're thankful that there are the white hats doing it because hopefully they'll tell you first before the bad guy gets in and steals your 20 gigs of data or 20 terabytes of data or whatever it is, right? But it's just mind-boggling that somebody would dump a whole bunch of corporate data into the cloud and then not secure it. But it happens, right? All day, every day. You have situations of unauthorized access. Like I said, the idea that generally speaking today, instances will be given a key pair for better security than the good old username and password, and then many times administrative people will immediately set that back up with the same usernames and passwords they were using before. And so we still have that risk of breach. We have misconfigurations. If you run a web server on your own equipment at home, at the office, you could mess up something, right? You could not create the settings and got some directory transversal. You don't update it so it's not patched and somebody pops their way in. And you then move it up to the cloud. That doesn't change again if you're running especially infrastructure as a service because you're responsible still for configuring that Ninja server. You're responsible for taking care of those types of things. And if you don't patch, right, you haven't offset that. If you're running a whole virtual machine, it's yours, just like if there was a piece of hardware there. I tell students that all the time. A virtual computer is no different. It's absolutely no different. Matter of fact, I get mad at them, take points off if I see them turn off the VM. I said, do you just unplug your damn computer at home? No. You just spent whatever for your gaming box. I know you do not do that. So why did you just kill VirtualBox, right? But that's what we have to keep in mind, that they are real. Now, we gain some advantages when we move into the container model because we're at least getting rid of some of that underlying. But we still have to maintain our web if that's what we're doing, for example. Even a web container, we still got to maintain. We configured it right. We maintain it. We keep it going.
But you have to make sure you've got that control with the service provider, that you're maintaining it.
It depends on the model you've picked, right?
Right.
Exactly. And then some of the headaches are just lack of knowing what's going on and compliance. Of course, compliance is a headache everywhere, right? It doesn't matter whether you're running public, private, hybrid, on-prem, mix of there. And most of us, that's where we're really going, right? Which I think is why we're seeing it more complex. We're moving to this model of we still have some things in-house. We have things in the cloud. We may have some things co-located somewhere. In many, many companies, that's the way it is. And the reality is that's probably the way it's going to maintain for some time, because there are certain things you probably shouldn't take to the cloud. You know, certain data sets that you're better off keeping at home, especially very confidential ones, employee records and customer records in some cases. So some of our cloud security statistics, I double-clicked, sorry. Host missions, 24% of organizations up in the cloud have not patched. Shocking, right? I mean, we're still got people running Windows XP. Not often, but it's there. 7, we're going to have this whole discussion again, right, with 7 here pretty soon. You know, and if you saw, Microsoft made a nice thing, kind of a tangent. I'll get one here. But they announced that they're going to provide free support through the election for 7. Did you hear that? Because all the voting machines are based on 7. It's like all the ATMs are still based on XP, right? So there's situations where we have those. And so we have a lot of unpatched stuff. Databases not being encrypted, and this is not just the database, but the key pieces of it. It boggles my mind how many people store passwords and do not encrypt those passwords, not even with a simple hash. So if one of my evil twins in the black hat world gets in, you just made their life easy. They now have all those passwords. So we need to be doing some of those things and be aware of those security considerations. Maybe it is me double-clicking here today. Report that they have privileged access, not implemented a privileged account security. DevOps is one of the big things you can do in the cloud, and has become super popular in the cloud, is to do that development work, where we can spin up virtual machines for our developers. So we know all of our developers, wherever they may be in the world, all have the exact same development environment. It's been one of the huge drivers of a lot of work. Is anybody doing a kind of a DevOps cloud deployment in here yet? No? But that may be where you go. A little bit, maybe?
Not yet.
Going to be. Yeah, it's a big, big model. But, it's one of the things that I see, and it's sort of like what happens to almost every company. Start off small, maybe 1 or 2 IT people. They have full admin. But then as you move up, they forget to take away full admin from everybody. It's easier just to create. And the same thing can happen in the cloud. Oh, the developer needs all this permission so he can get his job done, or she can get her job done. Really? Do they? Is that the model you really want to operate under?
My administrative assistant needs full control
Absolutely.
to this folder and to this database.
Mm-hmm.
Completely.
So it says, what was it? Average of 51 organizations publicly exposed in at least one cloud service. So you can see these statistics. It's huge numbers, anywhere from a quarter to 3/4 of organizations that are doing cloud stuff are still doing things insecurely. And then
The lift and shift model, right?
Well, that makes, yeah, exactly, especially in that model. They were probably insecure before they deployed to the cloud.
Correct.
And they did not use the cloud as a chance to sort of not only think about refactoring and redesigning, but how can we improve our security, or just what do we got to do differently to get a better result from moving to the cloud. And so that's what 90 through the next few years, most of the cloud security problems are not going to be the cloud provider's fault. 95% of them are going to be ours, right? And that depends a little bit based on the model you're in. Obviously, very high. It's probably 99.9 if it's infrastructure as a service, because they don't do anything for you there, really, right? Your VM is your problem. As you pick to some of those other kind of serverless models, then that theoretically pushes the burden back to the cloud provider. But most of them are still going to be us, because we didn't configure it right. We didn't set it up right.
a lot of this research that was pointed at this, both from ISC Squared and from SANS Institute, saying, security practices by cloud providers has increased over the last several years, right? So the security APIs and practices that Amazon and Google and Microsoft and Joe Blow, they're implementing sound services. It really comes down to what are our IT teams doing? How do we understand what security practices are being implemented? Who has control over that? And then whether I'm using a hybrid model or whatever model I'm implementing, what level of control does the IT administrator, the IT team have to that data and to those practices? And then again, going back to the access control things, how are we providing that? And that's why they're coming back and they're saying, still, hey, 95% of our breaches, of our threats are coming in from us, from the end user perspective.
And then there's a little bit more. This one's going to come up all at once. I'm going to kind of go through these. Compliance, unauthorized access. These are things that keep IT people up at night. They probably keep you up at night like they do for me. And it doesn't change when you go to the cloud at all. There's another slide here, which because this is all going to be, you can download the slides obviously from Spice World, and we're going to show you a link to get some additional resources. But some of the best practices, not surprisingly, a reference to know before, though that's mainly phishing, but education, security awareness training has to be a big part of what you do. Encryption, multi-factor authentication, limiting controls, testing security measures. I don't know how many times I see people put one in place but never test it. Sort of like a backup that you never test, that's a failure, right? Because the day you need it, it's not going to work. And that can be a cloud model, just like years ago it used to be. I saw clients that use tape drive. Oh, we back up every day. We got an incremental every day and a full this and blah, blah, blah. Have you ever tested that? Probably not, right? So we need to test our cloud security procedures, etc. So one of the things that we've done, we asked, and maybe half, roughly, of you have done some cloud. No, not many. A couple were thinking of dev, so I'm thinking probably here more have moved software as a service kind of cloud deployments than really pulling full workflows. But if you're here, you're wanting to know more about this, right? And so one of the things that we did, and it's going to be a resource that you can get, I put this together for CompTIA and for you folks, and is we put together a cloud migration checklist. Now, I make some jokes in the text, but if you Google cloud migration checklist, you get millions of results. If you put it in quotes so you get an exact match, you still get 6,700 plus results. So why in the heck did I take the time to write a new one? Well, if you do Google that and take a look, you'll see that all of them are from Amazon, IBM, Google, and third-party providers and cybersecurity firms. They're almost all cloud related. So when we were preparing for this presentation and thinking about what would be a useful thing, it's like maybe if we could cut through some of that. And because what's one of CompTIA's strong points, vendor neutrality. So we wanted to come at creating a new cloud checklist for you, the things to think about, the things to do. And it's one of the resources that you'll get to get as part of this. Those are the steps, kind of know what you want to do the analysis, but like I said, I'll show you the actual thing here in a minute. Okay. So you need to plan, you need to have a solid plan, and then you need to put in solid monitoring, not just from a security point of view, obviously, but like I said, one of the big challenges of cloud today is optimizing cloud. Once you get there, your job's not done just to throw everything in the cloud and say, hey, yay, we're done, we moved to the cloud. Your job is to get the most value out of that, the return on investment for your organization. Otherwise, you may be looking for a new job when the management said, yeah, we told you to do that, but we didn't tell you to blow budget by saying, we only spent this much last year. It was going to save us money, right? It was going to save us money, and you're not doing that.
Or your company appears in a headline.
Oh, yeah, or you didn't lock the S3 bucket down, and now you've got a major breach on your hands, right? So one of the things you'll want to do, and you'll get this, you might want to take that little bit, link. If you will go there, and we'll pop over real quickly and show it to you as well. But ultimately, Spiceworld will put the videos up like they do every year. Always fun. All the slides will be up. But you can get them sooner by going here. Quick little registration form. I'll actually show it to you real quick. Let's see if we can find it. There we go. So it's going to be this page. It'll ultimately take you over to it.
Didn't change.
Huh? Yeah, it did. Oh, no, it didn't. Oh, because we're still full screen on that part. We got to break out of this probably.
There you go.
Oh, thank you. Better yet. So the between the two of us, we're a tech team. What do you think?
Yeah, amazing.
There you go. CompTIA folks can do stuff. So you fill out the form. We're doing another one later this afternoon on troubleshooting. And so both of the sessions have free resources. You hopefully will come see that one too. We're going to do a little troubleshooting VM on malware and talk about some troubleshooting tips. But if you fill this out, you can download all this stuff, including the nice version of the migration checklist. If I just, ooh, I can't see now. We'll drive this way. Where's the mouse? Can you see, Steve?
Yep.
Am I close to, can you? I can't see to get the tab and bring over the other.
And then also by coming in, when you fill out the form, you're automatically enrolled in drawing. We're going to be giving away a complete set of courseware and exam voucher for the Cloud Plus cert and also for the A Plus cert for the troubleshooting part. So you get the complete bundle.
I almost forgot that one. But yeah, it's not just the voucher, it's the full self-training program if you're interested in those as well. And so there'll be a couple of resources and all the slides from the different presentations will be there. Now, one of the things we wanted to, before we go to questions, is we wanted to remind you folks, please, for us. We've been here a few times and we hope to come back. Last year we were here doing a cybersecurity presentation. And if anybody's interested in that, I'll talk to you offline and get you the resources from last year. But please use the app if you have it to check in that you were here and take the little survey at the end of it for us. We really appreciate the feedback. It was very useful to us last year. We got a little feedback that maybe we went a little too deep last year, so we kind of made sure we kind of kept it a little more. But we like to, I kind of maybe I went overboard with my GNS3 topology last year, but at least some people seem to enjoy it. So do we have anything else to add, or is that okay?
Questions?
Questions?
Awesome sauce. Yes.
Yeah.
We're kind of looking. I'm sorry. We're kind of looking at going like the next 2-3 years into that. Is the benefits of splitting different cloud vendors, as have some in one cloud, some in another, or does that add a layer of complexity to it to manage the two? I'm killing something somehow. Or is it old IT wants to spread out risk as much as possible? However, you just stick with one that's simple. You're only configuring one. You only have to learn one. Where is the balance? Or is it one of those usage may vary type of situations?
Well, I think it honestly is. If Mike was cutting out, he's sort of asking the balance between, like, do we just throw it in one cloud? We got that ease of going with one development, one API, one management. We only have to deal with one interface, one dashboard, as opposed to, oh my gosh, let's move it across multiple clouds. And there is no one. It's very much a you're going to find, and that's one of the things that I really feel is the truth. You really need to look at not that, like I'm moving my organization. Well, what does your organization do? Well, you've got productivity applications, you have maybe internal applications, there could be certain legacy. I don't know how many of you have an application that somebody wrote 5-10 years ago and you're still supporting this thing, right? And that guy's gone or that lady's gone and they're totally, and so maybe you're never going to move that one to the cloud. It's going to stay there until the day it dies and you finally redesign it. But you really have to look at the workflows and the applications themselves and decide, like if it's a critical, mission critical app, then to me, just that alone sort of speaks to, let's move that, let's design it in such a way that we could at least, even if we're not going to deploy initially to multiple, and you might for scalability, for pricing, for other reasons, or just that redundancy.
Availability would be the biggest thing, right?
But at least you could move it, right? Because you've more cloudified, if you will, refactored that application. Other applications, no, let's just drop that up there. And it's kind of funny because there's actually, in my opinion, two places where you can move from cloud to provider to provider. One is actually the simplest model, where you go and you had a server and you spin up a VM like that and you run that application. Well, if that's all you're doing, infrastructure as a service, they all run Linux VMs or Windows VMs. So, I mean, that's not hard, right? You can move that quickly if you need to. And then the other side is, okay, we're going to redesign and think this through, that we want to build it. Maybe even be able to use one of those things that'll, hell, one day we're running here and one day we're running there because it's cheaper for us. But kind of in the middle, that's going to definitely be a case-by-case kind of situation. Any other questions?